input to the developing country economy. Also, the impact of the economical crisis related to the pandemic. The fact that brutally there was no anymore travel by plane. So countries who develop tourism as one of the main revenues was completely affected by the pandemic. For instance, Sri Lanka, who developed a model of development very highly related to tourism, was completely lost in this situation because there were not anymore tourism, so not anymore revenues in foreign currency. Second recent example, the war in Ukraine provoked by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Consequences for countries, developing countries. The increase of the rise of the prices of cereals, because Ukraine and Russia were exporting normally a lot of grains to countries like Egypt, Senegal, other countries. And so the price of the grain increased a lot, and immediately it affected the economies of the developing countries importing cereals from the north. And because they were not anymore self-sufficient, the impact of this increase of the price of the cereals was very huge in several economies. Also, the Ukraine war provoked a raise of the price of energy, oil, gas, electricity, etc. And the South has no responsibility in this war. But the economies of the South were directly affected by the rise of the price of energy at the world scale, or oil, or gas, etc. Third example, in 2022, the Federal Reserve of the US, the Central Bank of the USA, and the European Central Bank, and the Bank of England decided to increase dramatically the interest rate. From 2012 to 2022, in the USA, Canada, Europe, also Japan, interest rate was zero interest rate. It was the main rate decided by the central bank. And from February, March 2022, the central banks of the North decided to change the rules. And they increased interest rate up to 5%. So from 0 to 5. So what was the consequences for countries like Philippines, Kenya, Egypt, Morocco, and others? When the interest rate from 2012 to 2022 were zero in the north, a lot of investment funds of the north were interested in buying bonds from Philippines, from Kenya at 4-5 interest rate, because it was a good investment for them. But because the US decided to raise the interest rate to 5, the same investment funds are not anymore interested in buying Filipino bonds at 5%, because they can buy US bonds at 5%, and it's more secure. So they are asking to Philippines, to Kenya, to Egypt, to Ghana, interest rate of 9, 10%. So the situation for the country changed very badly after this unilateral decision of the North. So I am explaining that to show that the model implemented by the developing government under the recommendation of the World Bank and the IMF fragilize their economies in case of external shocks. They are not responsible for these shocks, but they are victims of their shock. And that the population of the country who is the victim. So the question of alternative policies are absolutely vital. I have not any more time, but of course that I can show a relation between climate change, ecological crisis at a world scale, and the type of model recommended, implemented by the World Bank and the IMF. They are partly responsible of the aggravation, worsening of the climate crisis. Also, I can relate the policy of the World Bank and the IMF with the increase of inequalities inside all the countries and between the North and the South. So we have to get rid of this model and to say we do not anymore accept to depend of external borrowing. We don't want anymore to depend only on foreign investment. We want fiscal justice. We want to tax the richest. We want that the government tax the big corporation. We want agrarian reform or finalization of the agrarian reform and a public support to organic farming, a support to let the country to conquest food sovereignty. We want a government to increase expenses in education, in public health. We want a government to invest money to renewable energies. We want a government to invest money in industrialization to satisfy the needs of the domestic market and reduce the dependency from imports. We want the government to cancel illegitimate debt of the popular classes. We want the government to promote equality between men and women. So we want another model of development in favor of more justice. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, klaro man siguro dito no na ang IMF World Bank kasalit siya sa nakapasamot or root cause sa systemic nga problem or systemic nga poverty diri sa mga nasod, itawag nila Global South, so developing nasod sa Pilipinas, no? So nakita man dito nga kung mangutang ka sa IMF World Bank, na ay mga kondisyon. Isa sa kondisyon niya na nga dapat dili kayo mo hatag o budget sa mga social services. Dapat gamay ra inyong budget, no? Gamay ra budget sa education, no? No? So, kana ang mga example, makapasamot siya sa inequality. So, na-mention niya dito nga isa sa comparative advantage, isa sa model na ginapromote sa IMF World Bank, katong dunay comparative advantage ang nasod. So makita nato ang comparative advantage sa Pilipinas ang iyahang cheap labor. So muna nga ginapromote ang cheap labor, ginapromote na manggawas ta, no? Mag-abroad. So muna giingon nga walay industrialization di sa tuwa. Dili sama sa giingon niya, no, nga South Korea, Taiwan, at China, nga wala sila nag-follow. Wala sila nituman sa IMF World Bank. So makita nato karon mas gambo ang ilang ekonomiya. So kana lang gamay siguro og atong paminawon karon ang mga reactions, no? Ikan sa itong mga reactors, panel reactors. So, una, itong tawagon si Dr. Michael Jerry D. Abiol. Siya ang Dean sa College of Business Administration, St. Peter's College. So, nag-aaral po sila o nag-aaral po o 10 minutes maximum, no? Sa ilang reaction. Pagkahuman si Reyna Joyce, mga bagay. Nag-aaral po o gamay nga nag-aaral sila time. And then si Wisam Datumulo. Then after anak, si Shushubat from CDTM India, and lastly si Jawad Mustakbal from Atak, CDTM Morocco.
I'm Reyna Joyce from the Kilusang Maralita sa Kalayunan or Rural Movement of the Poor organization. Today is the 37th anniversary of Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. It's a policy in the Philippines where there is land distribution to the landless farmers, peasants, farm workers. No? The challenges among the communities are in relation to the parent debt. No? I will share about the program of one of the program of Department of Agrarian Reform, which also related that they are this program is the supporting for parcelization on land individual tithing or the split program, which the fund also are loan from the World Bank, 70-80% of the fund, and the 22% of this are funded by the Department of Agrarian Reform and the agency in the Philippines. This challenge, because the main purpose of the Department of Agrarian Reform or the CAR program is to distribute the land to the farmers, small farmers in the Philippines, especially the actual occupant of the land. But the program is evolving or shifting into more programs and replicating other programs like the programs of the Department of Agriculture, which have credit loans, farm mechanization. So it's shifting instead of focusing to land security. The challenges here is in the communities, there is massive land use conversion happening. If you happen to travel from province, for example, here in Iligan, Lanao del Norte to Zamboanga del Sur, you can see the massive land use conversion and that was neglected. So, and the 37 years of this struggle to land reform, to agrarian reform, somehow you can, how can I say this? You can see that there is no concrete, program for this, and we are still struggling together with the advocates and organizations and the grassroots communities to facilitate this. And we are advocating now a new policy for that because the CARP is supposed to end in 2014. And the land, the depth of the, wait, sorry, I always mental block. So, in the Philippines, we have also like many laws, like the Department of Agrarian Reform Administrative Order, that the agricultural lands, especially the irrigated and the arable lands, must not be converted into commercial or industrial, to ensure our food security. But because of these programs, it's not prioritized. It's not being prioritized now. So the challenges of the agricultural sector in the Philippines, facing now, especially that we are bombarded with multiple policies that affected us. The rice tariffication law, which it means that the importation is we can now import without restrictions. We have just tariff, but and in 2024 it was also reduced from 35% tariff to 15%. So it's another challenge on the agricultural sector. And so in our organization and in the grassroots communities, we are advocating agroecology, and as alternative. But it needs a national movement also to address these issues. And aside from that, public lands or forested areas also are converted into ecotourism resorts, not just in like forested lands. It's also happened in the foreshore areas. So, which displays also the farmers, the indigenous peoples, and the fisher folks. So, in that issues, we are challenged in our national sovereignty because the Philippines, we have depths above and below. We have, for example, farmers need to loan, multiple loans, and the salaries as farm worker cannot sustain it. So, for land preparation, you need to loan. You need to look for your for your production. Yes. And sa this incident was how can I this incident is sad and struggling, no, to farmers and to the grassroots communities because struggling to communities because how many so ang na siya kanang struggle siya sa komunidad tungod kay ang struggle siya sa komunidad tungod kay nagpatong-patong ang mga utang, no? Like home credit, card ink, so multiple loan programs, no? So we also in the farmer sectors there are also cooperatives, but sometimes cooperative tends to rely also or the easy way to accumulate the funds is through lending money, no, not support for production, no, and the challenge. There are also multiple challenges that they experience on that because, like the climate crisis that we are facing. Also, like for example, in July 2023 to June 2024, Philippines experienced El Nino, no, on that month, no. So almost 1 year, July to June. Many farmers, no, and even pressure folks share that it affects their livelihood, no. Their production fails, no, and so now their production fails, so okay, it's my time already. So these challenges is my final say is that we need to advocate for this, no, not just for the farmers and for the farmers and fisher folks, but also to all sectors, no, because food is farmers and fisher folks produce this food, no, and if we will not action on this, then the Philippines will in the near future will be not agricultural country anymore, and we will be landless. Right now the foreigners are starting to occupy also other areas of our land. So yeah.
So hi, good afternoon everyone. I am Isam as the tumulong the president of the Guild of Advocates for Humanity's Optimal Mending. As to what I have learned and what I am about to add or expound towards what are my key takeaways is that actually I've had knowledge about IMF, especially that we took a subject on our first semester about the Bretton Woods system, on how it was the system that was based on the IMF, and how, from what I could remember, IMF had 4 functions about storing financial resources, allowing them, advising and monitoring countries who have economic crisis. Yeah, and but Bretton Woods system actually emerged after World War II because of the economic crisis that every country has been experiencing. But then, since it has served its purpose, ended within 1971 or 1972, but still IMF stands because of its function of allowing debts. So, I guess, on the context of the Philippines, the reason why Philippines is not prospering, aside from other examples that were provided earlier, such as China, is that because China's way of industrialization and improving and development is kind of strategic. Why? Because China has been part of a race to the bottom system. So when talking about race to the bottom, you lower the standards of working, you deregulate prices in order for you to pay less towards the workers and still have the same expected amount of prices that each seller or buyer would give to you. So, here in the Philippines, as we have heard from our previous speaker, is that there is an existence of deregulation and injustices which our farmers are facing, and not just our farmers, other laborers as well, and even the common people who's even working at a minimum wage job. This is not strategic. Although this is happening, it's not the same as China, and it's still unstrategic because it's something that we think that the government is still not putting more focus on. So, when talking about, since I'm representing youth right now, when talking about the youth, what are the social services that the Philippines is or the state of the Philippines is providing towards their youth? Basically, this could go in forms of scholarships. This could go in forms of job opportunities for people who may have graduated or who does not have graduated yet. And this could also look like the curriculum amendment, especially that recently the K to 12 was amended, or like still planning to be amended into having less arduous process of studying, especially then they're gonna remove strands as well and gonna merge subjects in order for it to be more comprehensive to the students and less loose. And also leadership training and volunteer platforms. However, the challenge here is that because of the political landscape of the Philippines, in which they are trying to focus on external and internal factors simultaneously, the prioritization is lacking there. And I think that with the existence of its internal conflicts, such as corruptions, such as political leaders who have lapses, these kinds of social services are not being focused on. So we cannot step towards the improvement of industrialization if these kinds of social services are not prioritized first. So I think that in terms of developing, we're still far from it. So the alternatives were there when talking about investment and improving education, industrialization, especially utilizing natural resources, knowing that the Philippines the Philippines' natural resources are coming from its agriculture. Especially here in Mindanao, we're rich in natural resources. In fact, maybe about 90% of bananas in the Philippines are exported from Mindanao. Or like the 90% of lumber, the 70% or 75% of bananas are from Mindanao. That is the industry within the entirety of the Philippines. But the thing is, aside from that, is that there is a lack of experts when it comes to improving these kinds of natural resources. Why? Because there is, again, a lack of focus on which to prioritize. A lot of, not just government agencies, but even the non-government agencies are trying to focus more on developing technologies or developing industrialization, when in fact they have neglected the fact that we are rich in soil, we are rich in natural resources and such. So I think that we have to start with making people realize as to what really the potential of the Philippines is, in order for them to be aware of what are the plights or what are the sentiments that we have to raise towards the government. Because call-out mechanism is there. protest, we could do digital activism, we could do promotion and stuff. But one stepping stone that we need to have is the realization of our social reality and implementing it towards our actions. So, I guess time is up. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody, and I would like to thank St. Peter's College for holding this very timely discussion, and also the audience for for your consistent attention to the discussions here. I just want to quickly point out a few things. In fact, Eric Tussa, while speaking, had spoke about the World Bank, IMF, and how they pushed debt-driven development models. And then what happened was, once they pushed into debt-driven development models, countries were encouraged to borrow, to develop, quote unquote. And then when there was a debt crisis, so when the countries were not able to reimburse the debt that they were taken, the IMF and World Bank comes in, especially the IMF comes in, quickly with a set of policy prescriptions. Because what happens then is countries need to borrow more in order to pay the earlier loan, in order to service the earlier debt. So that's where the IMF comes up with its screw, tightens the screw, and it forces certain policy changes in the country. Now that is very important for us to understand, take a note, and it has happened in most of the part of the world. Of course, it has happened not without the collusion or the connivance or the active collaboration of our local ruling classes, of the local ruling elites, which includes politicians, the business, the industry, the captains of the industry, and people like that who benefit by it. So what did it do? Primarily, it came out of the discussions of my fellow panelists. First is a total withdrawal of the state from any functions of social protection, which means education, health, housing, transport, and various things which received sort of state support, the state withdraws away in the name of budgetary stability, in the name of reducing fiscal gaps. What do you mean by reducing fiscal gap? Reducing fiscal gap is you try to balance between your income and expenditure in the budget. So in the pretext, under the pretext of reducing fiscal gaps, the state comes in and withdraws from the sector. Very interestingly, there is little attempt to raise taxes from growing businesses and the industry. I mean, if you look at it in the last 30 years, all economies have grown at a certain point. So there's goods and value, goods and services, value created in the economy. Now, where did it go? The question is, where did the value go? There's value created. We can see the GDP results, the gross domestic product. So that is where they come in. And then there are a series of, in order to make the economy competitive, there's a series of prescriptions by the World Bank, notably the Ease of Doing Business report. Our fellow panelists were speaking about the race to the bottom. Now, the ease of doing business is one of the strongest stimulator and indicator of a race to bottom. Under the pretext of making business easy, what do? You do away with any sort of a labor protection. You do away with the violation of the core labor standards that the World Bank or the Asian Development Banks or the different regional development banks have set themselves. They do away with any form. So countries are forced to adopt a labor policy which do not favor the workers in any way. In the first place, deunionization. And you can see the most of the labor reforms that we had in the recent years in all countries taken together. One of the biggest challenges is for unionization and collectivization. There's a big challenge in unionization and collectivization all across the world. I mean, if we compare the labor laws and how it has evolved over the last 30 years, strikes are almost no-no. In many cases, strikes are heavily penalized. In many laws, in the labor laws of many countries, strikes are heavily penalized. pressurized to debar workers from resorting to methods, strike methods. All in the name of doing business, all in the name of continuing production. Second is, you see a huge outsourcing business which is going on, particularly in Asia, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia. And then, the workers of the countries are pitted against one another. So for example, an exporter from Bangladesh says that if you are not able to deliver this product, garments, Bangladesh mainly export garments, at this rate, will possibly look to Myanmar because the labor is cheap there, the regime is oppressive, the junta is there, will look to Myanmar. Similarly, when Vietnam manufactures shoes, the Vietnamese exporters are always pressurized. Now, where do you cut your cost? Because most of the input things of this export-oriented products are all imported. For example, if you say about garment export from Bangladesh, I know it very sure because it's from the region that I come from. The clothes is imported. All the fittings are imported. Bangladesh just adds the labor. It only adds the labor. Nothing is produced there. It doesn't have a textile industry. It doesn't have any fittings industry. You know, the most things that you require for a cloth, even the buttons and the threads are all imported. And it's a strategic location. Don't think it has happened just haphazardly like that. That you pressurize Bangladesh. Where do the Bangladesh garment exporter cut their cost? It's on the labor cost. Horribly paid, under horrible working conditions. You have series of accidents. You only remember the Bangladesh garments when there are accidents with the building falls and you have an immediate death of say 67 workers, 67 young women, and the country gains in the process. So this is the model. We were talking, a friend was talking about the cooperative movement. You will see, I mean, 60s and the 50s and 60s after I went to the Bandung conference earlier of Sukarno. In the 50s and 60s of the newly decolonized independent nations in most part of in our parts, in South Asia, Southeast Asia, we had a very strong cooperative movement. You know, we thought that cooperatives are a way out of the poverty that most of our populations are stuck. Cooperatives are strictly discouraged. Well, the World Bank doesn't have any paper which says that that we strongly recommend people not to fall in the traps of cooperatives. But we do not see any enthusiasm about cooperatives as their enthusiasm about microcredits, ease of doing business, financial inclusion, which means opening the financial markets for a vast sector of people, opening the insurance market for a vast sector of people, which is peddled as a sort of social security. We do not see, it's very difficult to find a single World Bank document, and I say this with a degree of surety because I search for it, which says to promote cooperative methods of production as a way out of the, to get things on track, to get the economy on track. So, this series of World Bank policies have caused a crisis of unemployment, a crisis of general state of being with your everything becoming costly or payable, even water at a certain extent. And when people are in a precarious situation, the World Bank peddles with solutions, which are equally dubious. For example, microcredit. Now, who on earth can borrow at 36%? And now, microcredit was primarily said it takes people out of poverty, lifts a generation out of poverty. It encourages a group of women as self-employment. Now, self-employment is a very dubious term. Once again, in our region, self-employment is seldom used as a form of disguised unemployment. So we see a series of self-employment, and self-employment basically, these are not self-employment like big lawyers or big doctors or big engineers of the world. These are people who do not find a job in the formal market. Self-employment is a very sugar-coated term for the immense informalization that goes on in the society. And informalization means you deny people their rights, as simple as that. If you look at the sectors, the production sectors, most of the Southeast Asian countries, I think 80% or 85% of the workforce are in the informal sector. Because the amount of casualization that is taking place, with the stop in recruitments in the public sector, the shrinking of the public sector itself, less and less people, layoffs, big nationalized sectors, state-owned or public sectors, industrial plants being shut off, including public sector ports. Earlier ports were all in the public sector. So we see in a series of Asian countries that new and new ports are coming up in the private sector, where public sector ports are shut down under one pretext or the other. So there is an immense livelihood crisis, and then you have something called microcredit, which is supposed to fill the void. Now, who on earth in the world is going to borrow at 36% per annum, repay the interest, make operating profit, and survive? If you look at the balance sheet of the big businesses, a 7% to 9% net profit is considered extremely heavy. Even in hot countries of the region, if a company makes a declaration that in this quarter or in this year the company has made a 9% profit.
Barca was also in this conflict. So all the leaders were killed or put in jail, and the elite, the king and his advisor, since the beginning followed the World Bank policies and recommendations. And then by the 80s, we implemented what's called the adjustment, structural adjustment program. So what is the result today? After like more than 50 years of implementing World Bank and then the IMF. So Morocco is one of the most unequal countries in our region, where the wealth is like concentrated in the hand of few people, and of course in alliance with the ex-colonizers. In terms of food sovereignty, in 1956 we were exporting meat toward Europe, toward the metropole. And you know, in our country, bread is the basic, like food. It's rice actually for us. Your rice actually is our bread. So when we got our independence, we were exporting, and 22% of our exports were wheat toward France. Today, we are importing 60% of our wheat, and our main exporter from France. So it's so we actually sacrifice our food sovereignty, and we move toward an export-oriented crops. That's as I said, sacrifice our food sovereignty, but also very harmful to our water. Because one of the big issues that we have in terms of climate change is scarcity of water. And by adopting this export model promoted by the World Bank and IMF, we're exporting actually our water in terms of oranges, avocado, strawberries, watermelons. So we're exporting watermelons and all those stuff toward Europe, which means that we're exporting water. So it's deepening also the climate crisis and the issues that we have. We also adopted the debt model, like the fact that through loans we will fix all the issues. What's happening today is that the debt services, like paying back the debt and the interest, is absorbing more than a third of our budget, the national budget. And the service of debt is more than 10 times for example, the budget for healthcare. And maybe just also a reminder about our colonial debt. So the debt that were contracted by the French colonizer, the new elite continue to pay back this debt until 1994. So it's almost 40 years after the French left the country, we continue to pay the debt that were contracted by the French colonizers. So just to give an example of this colonial debt, which is completely an odious debt, but the elite continue to pay it. Another example is, and it's also promoted by IMF and World Bank, is what we call a green colonialism. So today, under the pretext of protecting the environment, of encouraging like an energy transition, today IMF and World Bank are promoting more extractivist policies, especially for the rare earths and minerals. And I think you have the same. We have, for example, the mine of cobalt that are used for batteries for electrical cars, that mostly now used for Europe and the US, that are extracted from our lands with an exploitation and very bad condition for the workers. And we have some protests against that. And the other side also of this is the fact that the energy transition and all the renewable projects are used also as a pretext to liberalize the sector, the energy sector. Today, our energy sector is controlled up to 84% by private companies. French, Saudian companies, Spanish, and so on. So all this is just to give you an example of how bad it is, and that Morocco, it is shown by the elite and the imperialists as a good example. For us, it's a complete failure, and it's an example and case study to show how those policies fail. There's also another point that for me it's important, is that when it comes to that, the elite and the mainstream start to talk about the debt crisis when there is a default of payment. And I think we should really stop doing that, because this is their crisis, it's not our crisis. Defaulting, stop paying, actually it's a good start of solution. We need, because most of those debts are odious and are illegitimate. And this is why we in the CRDTM, we are calling to stop, and we are pushing our government to repudiate the debt. Repudiate it means that we need to decide sovereignly that we want to stop paying those debts, launching an audit to know who decides to get those debt, who benefit from them, and all the stuff. And this will help us to show how odious and how illegitimate the debt. But it's important that the crisis of debt for us, it's when we are paying back the debt service instead of allowing those resources to education, healthcare, and so on. And this is also important when IMF, because IMF pretend when they are coming to the countries to impose their policies, they are pretending came to save our countries. This is completely false and untrue. When IMF intervene in one country, it's more to save and protect the lenders. The first purpose of their visit is how to make the country continue paying back the lenders. This is the first, and this is why they are just pretending. They are not here to save the people, they are here to save the lenders. And this is why all their loans are also accompanied with conditions. So for me, it's clear that IMF and World Bank are tools for neo-colonialism and for green countries. It is also an institution that are used to perpetuate our dependency toward the core, toward the Euro and US. And through the export model that Eric was talking about. And I think I have a last one. I don't really still have some time. Okay, good. Thank you. Just the relationship between the sovereign debt, the debt that is contracted by the state, and the private debt, the debt for families, poor families, farmers, students. For me, there is also a relationship. Most of the families, farmers, students, like poor people are contracting debt. It's also because the state decided to withdraw from her responsibility in ensuring the basic needs. So education, so people are getting loans to pay for their kids' education. Well, should be a basic right, a human right. It's up to state to pay for it, or healthcare. So the fact that a country is contracting debt, sovereign debt, IMF and World Bank are imposing to the government to withdraw from those basic services, basic human rights actually. And this is what is also pushing the poor families, the students, the farmer to contract more for that. So for me, there's also a relationship between those two kinds of debt. And this is why we are also, as a CLDTM, calling for a consideration for all those debt, because most of it was also legitimate. And now I want to really finish with that. Just tell you about the struggle that we had in the south of Morocco that is feeded also by a victim of microfinance, mainly women, 10,000 women just erupted and decided to stop paying against the microfinance agencies. And it was very inspiring for us as an organization that also pushed us to make a study and to talk with those women and see how abusive the system of microfinance that is also was pretending saving or getting people from the poverty, while it's more taking benefit of people's poverty. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Am I clear? Great. Thank you so much for coming in St. Peter's College. My apologies a while ago for the inconvenience. I have something emergency. Just to make it sure, Madam Moderator, do we have question, or this is in general a comment regarding the India? Right. So this is the perspective in behalf of the academic community. If we're talking about, we're talking about credit and collection, debt chains, monetary policy, central banking, IMF, and so on and so forth. But we also need to acknowledge that we have the constitutions, we have our laws, we have different particulars of laws in each country. Though it's a good thing that we have the IMF, but there's also a bad thing as well. But again, as I mentioned a while ago, we're talking about the academic sector, especially in Filipino, in our it's already a culture in our tradition. That's the sad thing in the Filipino culture. I think we already have published papers, a lot of published papers, even in my our alumni and students as well, cite papers internationally. That there is really a problem of rigor in terms of the culture of the Philippines. Not only Filipino, us ourselves, even our government as well. Because there's a colonization, and we're talking about it's a good thing that, as mentioned a while ago, that if we can stop paying those a lot of interest, it sounds like a mediocre like that, but in the aspect of business, it's also different aspect. Because if we're talking the side of African business, we need to have interest. Without interest, we don't have capital. But so on and so forth, there's a lot of example for this debt chain. There's a lot of loan sharks. And that is one of the problems in our community right now. If you're familiar, there's a lot of online platform for loans. And it's sad to say that in in the what's this curriculum. Actually, the curriculum of the Philippines, we still need to improve it. If you're familiar with the curriculum K to 12, there is an instance says that because our curriculum are they're trained to be an employee, not as an entrepreneur. That's the sad thing in the curriculum. We always seek pretense not only for the K to 12 or the senior high, also in the higher education. We already mentioned it that why it's like this, why it's like the agenda of the curriculum. Because if we just say that the curriculum is we are trained employees, so basically, even though the curriculum stated there that it is a sample for them, there is a business finance. Business finance is a common subject course should be taken in the curriculum for the K-12, senior high school. But the sad thing is that, yes, students are trained, students are, they learn, but the problem there is to connect. Because basically the objective itself of the curriculum, it's like dissociative. It's not connected anymore. So, again, in the index peripheral, in that subjective of the curriculum, though we are improving, actually there's a lot of new curriculum, hopefully by in accordance to the Commission on Higher Education. I believe they mentioned it last time that we will be having another curriculum, maybe by around 2026 or 2027. It's because it's been 7 years already, so need to have a revision of the curriculum, as well as the matatag curriculum. Again, we can strengthen this more, not just only academics, because it is not really easy to change a culture. Perhaps that is one of the variable. Yeah, okay, we use the variable in the culture, in the settings. That's the problem. Maybe that is one of the factors. But of course, in this partnership, of course, we can create new knowledge, not only in research, but of course, the experience of every countries, and not only Filipinos, as well as Indians, as well as Europeans, as well as other nations as well. So that is on my that is not on my perspective, that is on perspective on the academic industry. Thank you so much.